coming back to when you took us through a typical day, you mentioned intermittent fasting. And so that's at least part of your routine on some days. You can get into the specifics of how often you're doing that. But tethering this to the thesis of this conversation, nutrients and nutrient deficiencies, do you ever find that people who are adopting that too often, too long, because their eating window is going to become so narrow, do you ever find people that push that are running into nutrient deficiencies because of that practice?
Yes, I think that's possible. I mean, the premise is with intermittent fasting, or one idea is that, okay, maybe you're eating the same amount of calories, but you're just compressing that food intake into a smaller window. But I've done a lot of tracking with people who are patients that are doing intermittent fasting, and what's often the case is that they consume fewer calories when they're intermittent fasting. Now, this can balance out over time if they're doing intermittent fasting consistently. You can get a kind of adjustment period, or an adjustment where they start consuming, kind of get back up to their normal calorie intake, which is good or bad depending on how you look at it and what the goals are. It sometimes explains why it doesn't, people don't just continue to lose weight when they're intermittent fasting for a longer period of time. Like they reach a kind of equilibrium and the weight loss slows down or even stops entirely. But all other things being equal, if you are only eating 2 meals a day and you're not replacing eating the full calorie intake, then almost by definition you're going to be eating less nutrition. You're going to be getting fewer nutrients. And given my focus on nutrient density, I am sometimes, I am a little bit concerned about that in some cases. And I have seen this verified with serial nutrient testing in people who, we test them before they start intermittent fasting, and we test them at various time intervals throughout their experience with intermittent fasting, and we have seen declines in nutrient levels. It doesn't always happen, but it's not uncommon. So again, I mean, it's like, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it depends what the goals are and why someone is intermittent fasting, what they're doing. If I have a patient who's overweight with metabolic problems and early stage Parkinson's, I might have them on a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting all the time, because in that situation, we're optimizing for neurological health, and both intermittent fasting and being in ketosis will have a very good effect on their neurological health. And we can make up for the nutrient shortcomings with supplements in that situation, because we have prioritized the neurological health there. And we feel that that's the most important thing to achieve with the diet. And then we can make up for the nutrient shortfalls with supplementation. However, if for someone who's just pursuing kind of general health and well-being and extending their health span, I don't think that extreme of an approach is necessarily warranted or beneficial, because you're kind of there again over optimizing for one variable or one particular goal at the possible expense of many other goals. And so when you're targeting broad overall health, I don't think that's a wise approach. So for most people, I think intermittent fasting a few days a week is a something to experiment with and see how they feel. For myself personally, I don't do it in any kind of rigorous way. I just I've learned to trust my body, and I listen to my body. And if I wake up, one morning and I feel like I'm in a good place to do that, and I'm not especially hungry, and my schedule supports it, then I will do it. Sometimes I do make a plan, and I have periods of time where I'm like focused and intentionally doing it. But a lot of the time I'm just kind of going based on, what I feel my body needs, or frankly, there will be times where it's situationally dependent. Like I have an extremely busy morning and lots of things to do. And, preparing a meal is just not practical in that time frame, and so de facto I'm intermittent fasting that day, or I'm not having my first meal until 11 when I feel like it's time to eat. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but I think for most people that I've worked with, a moderate approach rather than an extremely rigid approach works best.
And how do you feel about longer fasts periodically for unique benefits such as autophagy?
Fantastic. I think there's a saying in medicine that fasting is the cure for all disease, and that might be a little bit hyperbolic, but there's certainly something to it. There are a lot of studies linking longer term fasts with numerous health benefits and even reversal of so-called incurable diseases. Um, it's dependent on the situation. If someone is fairly robust in their constitution, their overall health, and they're either normal weight or maybe even a little bit overweight, or good amount of muscle mass. So that type of person, I think, could benefit from an extended fast. Whether it's 3 days, 5 days, or more. If you have someone who's dealing with 2 or 3 complex chronic diseases, autoimmune disease, maybe they're underweight, they have low muscle mass, they're not sleeping well, they're drained, they're significantly below baseline when it comes to homeostasis and recovery. I don't recommend fasting, extended fast for that person, because that's going to fasting is a stressor, right? It's really important that people understand that. And in the right situation, it can be a hormetic stressor, which means hormesis is something that induces a positive adaptation. So exercise is the example most people are familiar with. When you lift weights, you're actually stressing your muscles. You're tearing down muscle fibers if you're lifting to failure. But what will happen is that will promote a positive response in the body. It will help the body to rebuild that muscle tissue stronger. And that's why if you lift weights a lot, your muscles get bigger and stronger, provided you're leaving enough time for recovery, which a lot of people don't. If you understand how hormesis works, that's a key point. You need to have enough time for recovery for the body to engage in that hormetic process. Now, if you take something that could be hormetic, like exercise or fasting, but you push it too far, or you do it in the wrong circumstances, then it is no longer hormetic. It's just maladaptive. It just becomes a pure stressor, not a hormetic stressor. And so, someone in that situation, like I mentioned, with multiple chronic illnesses, not sleeping well, low muscle mass, low weight, the additional stress of fasting in that situation will be problematic and could make them worse.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Most recent research suggests that over 90% of Americans fall short of the optimal intake of not just one, but several micronutrients. This is also true in other developed countries around the world. So there definitely has been a decline.